Yeah, part two of the ice cream wars. I still ain't got over the how conveniently these two supposed hardened criminals, luckily for the police, both said something that incriminated themselves. Yeah, I'm surprised as well that a judge didn't. But it does seem, I think sometimes when they got it in for you, but you do see some cases where judges are like, what? That don't make no sense. Like Blink tells the story of winning a court case, he represented himself. But yeah, sometimes you get a decent judge and the judge is just, but however, that didn't raise any suspicion that both of them put themselves in it. But anyway, yeah, let's go.
Thomas Campbell grew up in a tough neighborhood. He was the toughest of them all.
A lot of people were frightened of his reputation because he wasn't scared for anybody. And if you come up against him, you knew you'd come off worse.
That says a lot in Glasgow as well, especially back then. I think but yeah, that says a lot.
Well, he was the best fighter. He could fight anybody in a square go. That's without a weapon. He was good at fighting, or with a weapon, he was excellent. He'd come up against him and last long anyway.
When you say he was excellent with a weapon, explain.
And he was good at fighting. Hardly ever then he got the better of him in a battle. Opposite gangs, when they seen him, they would usually run. If he was at the front of their gang, he usually was. First into the battle.
And weapons were what?
Knives, hammers, axes.
Axes?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's the thing. Everyone goes on about knife crime now, but you go back, like, especially Glasgow, but always had a problem with knives. Like the old slasher gangs and, yeah, even the prison in, Slasher Gallagher in Bellini prison, it would slash inmates.
Rarely, in Trial and Error's experience, do we get to hear directly from the victims of justice's mistakes. On this occasion, Campbell can speak for himself about those wild teenage years.
You look back on it and you see it's absolute madness and lunacy, because it was like cowboys and Indians with real weapons and people were being seriously injured, and a lot of my friends were killed, and a lot of people that I was involved in were near to death. I was near to death on a few occasions myself. I was butchered a couple of times myself. I've been hit with axes, I've been bayoneted, I've been hit with swords, open razors, every conceivable weapon you can think of, meat cleavers. And it's absolute madness. It's over nothing. It's for no gain or nothing to it. It's just absolute madness.
Campbell claims he settled down after he got married and had children. His ice cream van business suggests he wasn't a master criminal, but he says the police wouldn't believe that he'd changed his ways.
They didn't want to believe it. To them, I was, as far as they were concerned, public enemy number one.
In another age, we'd have said that Thomas Campbell...
There you go. That literally is what I just said at the beginning. Sometimes they just got it in for you. And yeah, you make a name for yourself like that. They obviously wanted him for something. And if he turned his life around, they're going to be fuming that they couldn't get him when he was active.
Born to be hanged, or at least to have spent a great deal of his life behind prison walls for some crime or another. But the murder of 6 people isn't just any crime. To do justice to something that terrible, the right people should be convicted for it. And
also, if he's a tough guy, that's not a very tough guy thing to do. That's almost a bit cowardly to set someone's house on fire when people are asleep in it. He doesn't, if he's willing to be the front of the gang in battle, it doesn't sound like his character. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't seem like that would be his way to go about sorting out a problem, would be set on fire in the middle of the night.
to do justice to itself, the judicial system should convict not on the basis of bad character, but of good evidence.
Yeah.
So how good is love's evidence? The evidence where he swore to being in the Netherfield pub and hearing Campbell and Steele plot the attack. After all, when Granger collapsed as a witness, Billy Love became the core of the Crown's case. Love had told the police that he heard the conversation on the weekend of March the 23rd. But extraordinarily, another statement he'd already given the police meant that he couldn't have been in the pub at all. It happened like this. Love was in prison accused of an armed robbery when he told the police about the pub meeting. But this robbery, as it happens, had been committed the very same weekend, March the 23rd. Love, an experienced villain, had come up with an alibi for every minute of that weekend to make sure that the robbery couldn't be pinned on him. But that alibi account for the weekend of the robbery has not a word about any visit to the Netherfield pub. Nothing about seeing Campbell and Steele, let alone about hearing a conversation about firebombing the Doyle family flat. Yet this is the same weekend as the one when he told the police that he did hear the men plotting the crime in that pub. Both accounts of the same weekend can't be true. One way or another, common sense suggests that the central witness in the trial of Campbell and Steele is a liar.
Were you present in the Netherfield bar when there was a conversation about Fat Boy?
But when Campbell and Steele's case first went to appeal, though the court decided that Love's evidence was imprecise, it upheld the convictions. But perhaps they'd have thought differently had they known, as we have discovered, Billy Love's own involvement in the ice cream wars. Remember that shotgun attack on the ice cream van? A shooting witnessed by this woman who never gave evidence at court. Agnes, what do you know about who the man was with the firearm?
It was my brother, William Love.
Billy Love?
Mm-hmm.
How do you know it was him? Had he given you any indication that he might be doing that?
Yeah, because he brought the gun into the house that evening. And I says to him, what are you going to do with that, Billy? And he says, I'm going to shoot Jimmy Mitchell's ice cream van just to frighten him, not to harm anybody, just to frighten him so they would move off the scheme.
Did he show you the gun?
Yeah, it was about that size, and it was sawed off at the end, like a sawn-off shotgun. It was about that. He had it in a black bin liner.
So he shows you the gun that night, and then he leaves?
Yeah.
But does revealing Love as a gunman make his evidence any less reliable? There are 5 ways to prove William Love is a deliberate liar. First, we found that on no fewer than 3 previous occasions, Love has been found guilty of perverting the course of justice. Reason number 2. In the course of investigating this case, we had spoken to Billy Love when he was in Dartmoor. Even then, he had admitted lying. After his release, Love went to ground. Or rather, as we discovered, to water. We'd heard he'd been living on a houseboat on the Thames down in London. When we tracked him down, Love was alarmingly frank about his part in the shotgun attack.
I was responsible for the shooting of the van, yeah.
Why did you do that? Were you acting on instructions?
No, I was not for Tommy Campbell, that's for sure, but I ain't stating who gave me the instructions, but I can state it wasn't from Tommy Campbell, yeah.
But you went out in the Volvo?
That's right.
With the balaclava?
Yeah.
With the shotgun?
Yeah.
And your sister saw you?
My sister saw me from the window.
Reason 3, Love is still admitting he lied at the trial of Campbell.
That's mad. Because I was thinking when it was his sister, although it is his sister putting him forward, it still is a bit of the same thing, really. Not that she's criminal like he is, but he's still taking someone's word. But he just straight up said it. It's like, but then maybe you would be very honest about just doing the shooting if you had actually killed that family. Because people go, well, he was honest about the gun. But yeah, let's see where it goes.
Steele. Did you hear any conversation about any firebombing in the Netherfield pub on March 23rd?
Never in my life, mate. I've never heard anybody discussing anything about fires in my life, mate.
How about
Burning
in the
people.
Netherfield
shortly after the weekend of April 7th, 8th?
Never, mate. It was never discussed, man.
In any other
It was
pub, did you hear
fabricated.
people discussing
It was
firearms?
fabricated information, mate. It was never said at all whatsoever.
In any...
I like the fact he's getting annoyed when he's the one that put him in prison for years.
pub at
Never
any other time?
pub, never in my life has it been said. Never.
Where did it all come from, that story?
You tell me, mate.
But why should we believe a story told by a self-confessed liar? Reason 4, the recollection of this man who was in prison with Love when he was suddenly released on bail. Frank Falloon said Love had told him at the time that the police had offered him a deal on the armed robbery charge.
Yeah, that was the bottom line. That if he would go along with what the police told him, then the charges against him on armed robbery would be dropped. I told him he was playing with fire and he was going to get burnt. But Billy's that man for listening. His first intentions is freedom, regardless of the cost. As long as he's out the door, doesn't matter. Consequences don't matter.
That's why a rat's called a rat. Because a rat will do anything to survive.
He'd been through all the procedures of bail, refused on all conditions. One morning, a pal of mine came down for the top flat in our hall and told me Billy Love was going out on bail. That only meant one thing, that he'd accepted the deal and the police offered him.
We think William Love's deliberate perjury sent 2 innocent men to prison. Because there's a 5th reason why the system should have been suspicious about the integrity of Love. And the evidence was actually in the hands of the system itself. Love, as we've said, had already given conflicting accounts of the conspiracy plot on March the 23rd in the Netherfield pub. In one, he says he heard the plot to firebomb the Doyle. In another account he gives, he wasn't even there that weekend. One at least must be untrue. Now Trial and Error can disclose the existence of yet another version Love gave the police. This time he is at least in the pub, but the plot's being hatched on a completely different date. Not on March the 23rd, but sometime after the weekend of April the 7th and 8th. We know the account in this statement is a lie. We know it for the simple reason that on the weekend of April the 7th and 8th, William Love was behind bars, in jail. He couldn't have been in the Netherfield or any pub. Yet he'd sworn this statement in front of a sheriff. A cast-iron piece of perjury which could have been exposed as such by simply checking the prison record. This lying statement, which was in the files of the prosecution, was dynamite. It could have blown apart the whole case against Campbell and Steele. But it didn't, because this potentially explosive piece of evidence simply wasn't disclosed to the defense. What do 12 lost years do to a man? The career criminal regards prison as an occupational hazard, the tax he pays on his trade. Both Campbell and Steele have done things they deserve to be punished for. Does it matter that this time they're paying dues, doing time for a crime they did not commit? Campbell has always protested his innocence. Refusing to eat prison food, he spent months on hunger strike and years in solitary confinement.
When I wasn't eating, for instance, so there is no break up in the day, there is no breakfast time, there's no dinner time, there's no tea time, there's no supper time. So each day, each week, each month became the constant minute. There's no difference from the night and the day. There's no difference from when you sleep and when you don't sleep. It's just the perpetual minute to live within that time. And no time passes, and no time is coming forward, and no time is passing. It's just perpetually standing still.
Did you expect to die?
Yeah, I expected to die.
Did you want to die?
didn't want to die, but I expected to die. There were occasions where after 97 days without food, they locked me in a cell and took away my tea bags. Because although I wasn't eating, I still had my own tea bags. I was drinking tea, black tea. So they took away the tea bags, took away my pens, my pencils, and my paper so that I couldn't write. So after 97 days without food, they took away, and I was 10 days without fluids. At that point, death would have been a blessing. Death would have been a blessing in many of the occasions, because there's a lot of pain, throughout the whole body, and a lot of psychological pain.
Over the years,
solitary
Thomas Campbell has
confinement.
been no stranger to pain.
16 prison officers came into my cell, ring my cell, riot gear, batons, and just beat the living daylights out of me, handcuffed me behind my back, and jumped all over me, jumped my stomach, squeezed my testicles, kicked my ribs. Just a torture session. The official version was that I'd fell from a wall in an attempt to escape. And then the second version was that I'd suffered from appendicitis. And then finally they admitted what had happened. I had to take that to civil court, and I won that at civil court.
So you won compensation for having been assaulted by the prison service in jail, or agents of the prison service?
Yes, he also got compensation for an infestation with lice in what was supposed to have been the hospital wing of Peterhead Prison. And these were bird lice which were crawling all around the bedding, and they infested and infected his wounds.
How did he manage to get the evidence out about that?
He stuck the lice in sellotape and sent me a letter saying, "Can you do something about it?"
Joseph Steele did not campaign from inside the system. His protest against prison was repeatedly to escape from it.
It was 24 hours a day. I was plotting and planning to protest. It didn't matter if I had a problem outside with my mother, my family, my girlfriend or a baby. Constantly, I was trying to highlight my case. I think up other ways to bring it to the public's attention.
Steele escaped 3 times, making his protest by handcuffing and supergluing himself to various prominent landmarks, such as Buckingham Palace. He then returned obediently to jail.
At the end of the day, I think it was about the best thing I've ever done, because people started to take notice and say, well, here's a man, done me 6 murders, he's on a run for prison, he's out 4 days and he's glued himself at the gates. So, but I always knew anyway, from day one, if I ever got in a position to escape, I would do it. And I always knew that I'd highlight my case and come back.
You were asking to be sent back to prison, aren't you?
Aye, I was just, my cry was, I'm innocent, please somebody listen and somebody do something about it.
The
Fair
doubts
play.
about these convictions are not confined to the reliability of William Love. There should have been question marks too over the other central witness against Campbell and Steele, Joseph Granger. Granger was the man who'd originally told the police he was with Campbell and Steele on the night in question as part of the firebombing squad. Granger has consistently complained that the police put him under pressure to come up with that statement. Complaints he made to his solicitor, Tony Mann.
I found that not unusual, because the police tend to do that. They'll pull in as many local people as they could to try and squeeze till the pipsqueak. And if they don't get anything out of that, then who knows what they might do after that. I wasn't the least bit surprised when later on I found that when Joseph surfaced, he was supposed to have signed some confession.
If God should strike me down dead on any of my family's life, that is the truth. I never even heard of the Doyles. Never, it's certainly nothing whatsoever to do with it. Do you know what I mean? It's crazy, it's as if it's somebody else. Do you know what I mean? You know what's been going on all these years.
You told the police that you were with Campbell and Steele at the Doyles, were you?
I never told the police that. The police told me that. It's a big difference.
And I suppose at one point Joe broke, and I just remember one day he came home and it was late on, and he told me they ended up signing a statement that they had made because they threatened him that they would charge him with the Doyle murders and he would get 30 years.
Yeah. Granger's girlfriend always maintained that they spent the evening innocently together. When Granger eventually signed a statement saying he was involved in the fire, Lynn Chalmers felt under pressure to do the same.
I didn't want to change my statement. Then when the police arrived, they told me that if I never changed my statement, they were taking Joe away and he'd be charged with the Doyle murders and he would get 30 years in prison.
And you changed your statement?
They handed me a piece of paper with the statement written and told me to sign it.
You signed something which you knew was untrue then?
Mm-hmm. Because I thought they were going to take Joe away and it came 30 years because by this time I really was frightened because and I just knew, I don't mean I knew, but I was frightened because they were able to take us away to police stations and when people were phoning up to find out if we were there, they were saying no. So they were getting away with saying no, that a certain person wasn't here, try another police station, not the time you were sitting there.
You'd lost control of your life then?
They had control. They ended up having control of your lives.
I put it to you that you went to the flat.
Granger knew he'd be in even worse trouble if he withdrew the statement he said the police pressured him to sign.
Well, if he withdrew his statement, then he ran the danger of being charged himself.
With what?
With murder.
The police would say, right, if we don't have your statement, we're going to charge you with murder.
Yes.
On what basis? On what evidence?
On the basis of his alleged confession.
Which he'd withdrawn?
Yes, but that wouldn't matter.
So there he was. If he withdrew his statement, he ran the risk of being charged with murder. So what did you advise him to do in court then?
Tell the truth. You'd have to tell the truth in court.
But you signed the statement not because you told the police officers these things, but because of what? Pressure and their bullying?
Yes.
You want the ladies and gentlemen to believe that everything I've put to you has been made up by police.
I swear on my mother's life, I know all about that fire.
So, at the trial, Granger, as we know, withdrew what he'd said to the police. But what had he actually said? His statements were never disclosed to the defence at Campbell and Steele's trial, but we've now had the chance to examine them. And they make...
You can't do that. Well, we're nearly finished anyway. Just finish off.
Explosive reading. 2 words in particular are forensic dynamite. A week. He tells the police that he kept lookout for the firebombers on the night of April the 15th, a week after the pub plot. So April the 9th would be the date the plot was hatched. But Love swore it happened in March, and it was on Love's evidence that the conviction depended. How could the Crown prosecute Campbell and Steele for murder with this contradiction at the heart of the evidence? And why wasn't this key contradiction disclosed to the defence? Historically, disclosure of evidence in Scotland has been a matter of discretion by the authorities.
Yeah. Crazy. Although I heard them do something like that in a different... Someone was saying it I was watching the other day, where they withholding evidence from the defendant, which you can't do. They have a right to know all the evidence. Like, yeah, that's what I mean. When it does seem when the system wants you, they are gonna get you. Yeah, crazy. That was mad. That was mad. And the fact that, like, this is the other thing I don't get as well. How comes there weren't... I mean, I know how comes. But why aren't the police that did all that and everybody that was kind of involved in that framing, why aren't they sentenced? Like, even when he said he got beat up and he said it was a civil case, why? Why is it not criminal? I mean, I know why, but, like, that alone is crazy. Like, how is there no nothing for them people? There's no consequences for the people that quite obviously set these two up. Shout out to Joe Steele as well. That's such a... I mean, I suppose in a way, if you escape from prison, you can never actually live a normal life, really. you're always going to be looking over your shoulder waiting for the day that they suss. But to go and, yeah, chain yourself to something and kind of highlight what's going on, I have to say, respect for that. That was, yeah. But yeah, this was crazy. And it just seemed a bit like Kevin Lane as well, to be fair. It just seems like a complete setup. And something that woman said as well is why people don't ring the police. Right. Where she said they just control your life. And that's why I'd never, unless it was like a missing kid or something, then obviously you've got no choice because they've got the resources to be able to kind of shut things down and get CCTV. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, once you ring police about a situation, the situation then becomes out of your hands, and they are in control, and they can take control of anything at any point in your life once you initiate. A bit like vampires. Once you let them in, that you can't get rid of them. But yeah, I fully get what she said, that they were like just controlling everything. And that's the other thing as well. If that boy weren't a hardened criminal, yeah, you're not gonna stand up when they're threatening 30 years or whatever. But yeah, yeah. The same as how is it for the Billy bloke, the brother of that woman? How weren't charges brought against him? Yeah, crazy. This was crazy. And it just seems like a complete fitting up. Like no ifs, ands, buts, or maybes about it. It's just a complete set, and it's scary. It's scary, like it's scary that the law and the system holds that power. But that's why you don't ever want to upset them. I mean, Russell Brand's finding that out right now. But yeah, this was a great request. But yeah, that's the reaction. Sweet.